All right, good morning, everyone. We can start this officially. I hope you're all doing well. And it is Monday, October 21st. So let's do a little update here, the expectations for the week, and get a little deeper dive in what's going on with these equities. And the way I look at it and break things down overall, and what I was looking for last night with our team, and even from the I guess, from the pre-market session, from the overnight session going into this week and what's kind of expected. We still have like a continuation to the upside realistically in these markets, but one of the key factors is that we're getting a little overdone right now. There's very light volume as we continuously try to press higher and higher, and that's a very big concern the way I see things because we're like when markets make all-time highs, we establish a balance, right? Well, ideally, we would establish a balance and hold that balance. Now, the current situation is that we're coming into a period of uncertainty, not only with the elections coming up in about 2 weeks, but also we've got earnings on big tech, which has started with Netflix that has done very well from last week. But we also have Tesla this week, we've got IBM this week, and then the week after, we're starting to look at some of the bigger names like Google's, Amazon, stuff like that. So we'll see how Tesla does, but I wouldn't say it's like one of those pivotal, most important factors that makes or breaks the market. But it is a start leading into the big tech category that we're interested in. So this week is not that heavy on the news front. I believe there are some Fed speakers overall, but nothing too crazy. More so, people are probably going to wait for the Tesla earnings that come out midweek. And then going into next week, some heavier earnings. Now, one of the big factors that I wanted to take note of is, yeah, okay, we are moving into an established balance into this upside. As you guys can see, these are the last 5 sessions here. This is the overall balance on the S&P 500 from 59, 10, 12 area, right? An important balance top, and then the balance bottom sits somewhere at 58, 85 to like 88. Right. So we're establishing a balance. And when we move into an all-time high, it is nice to establish something of the sort and continue that kind of hold, but eventually get that press to the upside. Now, one of the main things that I look at is the weekly chart to begin things out. Now, this is how I start to analyze the week. This is the first thing I look at as we're coming into a new week to get a better established understanding of what happened in the prior week, where the balance actually rests, and what the potential of these moves looks like. Now, obviously, we are continuing this upside press, but this is the prior week, right? The prior week establishes this massive balance, and the general week's lows are right where this volume cuts off from the week before that, where this balance starts over here at 58.50. So one of the main concerns is that we've left behind this excess move of volume into these highs, which has been failing to actually go and accept and actually run through over the past few sessions, which I don't necessarily love. But we have established a balance low right around that mid 80 we were talking about. So as long as this holds, I do think that there is maybe an attempted move to go clean this up, right? Moves above 59.10, 12, I mean, on the close of a session, is what's going to help project this thing to the upside swing throughout this week. So it's pivotal that we have that. Now, volume to the downside, right, or volume trying to hold out support isn't that strong. So the possibility of going to clean some of that up before finding a better bid is not that bad realistically, but it does depend on a close below these areas. If we start closing sessions below these areas, then for me, fine, right? At that point, I'll be looking for some kind of downside. And then that major low is going to be at 58.50 that we have, right? With some expectation to the upside swing. Now, the best possible outcome for the Bulls, in my opinion, this week is either we hold this 58.50, which we've tried a lot, or for me, the most ideal outcome is that we actually move back into this balance and rebid aggressively back above that 58.50 on a close, and then we can start buying into that area for that established movement up. So for me, that's mainly where I'm kind of leaning towards being a stronger buyer, because the fact is, we've established, yeah, some upside momentum, but like on very weak volume on these pushes to the upside. Generally speaking, on the RTH session, the S&P, I'd rather it have like, let's say about 850 to 900,000 contracts traded on the RTH we look at the RTHs in the past week, we got 730. The down days are presenting a lot more volume, 970, 750 on an upswing, on a downswing 1.14, on an upswing 730, and all the way back here where we established this low auction low, right? Which starts, right? There's a peak where that balance starts at 58.50. That's when we had actually a decent amount of volume, right? 830,000. So the weakness of volume into these highs with an attempted continuation back into this like 10 to 12 area and constant failures is telling me that, yeah, okay, as long as we're between this auction, yeah, let's try it. Let's see if we can get that expansion higher. But we start closing below. Main target is the 50 area to find some buyers and potentially at lower prices. Maybe go clean this auction and then we find some kind of support structure from there. So as we're looking at this to start off the week, right, one of the big things from last week that was important was this momentum move on the overnight session where the balance of these highs was dropped off right at that 59.10 to 12 area. And then we had this unfinished auction excess move that's been plaguing the market every time we go into it, and it's just been failing constantly. So the bid is easy. It's up for grabs here that we can go and take this, but we got to do it. So far, we are holding these areas, heavy volume, excess, heavy volume, which is doing pretty well. So if we close pretty much these mid 90s, honestly, on today's session, I think that if we get pullbacks onto the buy around that 88, 85 area, I think they're buyable to see if we can get that continuation to the upside sweep. So far, we made an excess move below and above, but the most recent was the move below that balance low. So right now I'm kind of positioned to see if we can hold out some of this long side. I didn't take any trades on the overnight session today, right? They set up pretty okay, honestly. I guess I was a little more calm going into it, especially with this week of uncertainty. I'm going to be traveling on Wednesday as well. Want to take it very slow, but could be done on the day. So we're holding the balance low right now. And honestly, for today's session on the S&P, I want to see that mid 80, high 80 actually hold out for that bid, especially if we're going to close the overnight session into the mid high 90s. The expectation is for us to hold this massive volume structural low into this balance low as support structure. So when I'm looking at, that's what I'm looking at on the S&P here. On the NASDAQ, right, we're looking at a very similar situation. You can see both of these. We come back into the balance low here, right? This is the established balance low on the SPOOs, and we're getting this flush to the upside sweep. And then over here on NASDAQ, I had the balance low close to maybe 370. We head fake a little lower. We get a few people stuck, and now we're getting this expansion, but that's okay, right? We open back within this balance. I'm still looking to fish out some longs on pullbacks to see if we can go into that balance top and actually project out to the upside, because Friday OPEX, right? We held 520 on NASDAQ religiously, and we failed it on the overnight. So again, just like the 59, 10, 12, the 520 on the NASDAQ is establishing itself as a major region where the expansion above has to open out, right? So it's a very pivotal point for us to watch out on and need to see this kind of expansion to the upside sweep. A very similar construct here on the NASDAQ. NASDAQ has been actually toying with an auction lower, more so than the S&P, right? Many might say. We start off with the same principle here, and we're looking at this thing from the weekly perspective, right? The NASDAQ in terms of big balances, it's established them more clearly in the past. And we're having a lot more difficulty with the follow through on NASDAQ, probably tech being a little more underweight than other markets right now, especially with earnings coming up in those larger tech companies. We're probably waiting for those to come out, and then we'll see how this market kind of reacts to that. But Netflix has been really good from last week. It's up like 11% from the prior close before the earnings. We'll see how Tesla does this week, but the more important factors are going to be centered around the laggards in the Mag 7, which are like Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. Like Apple's trying to make a new all-time high. Where is Apple? Let me just take a look at it quickly here. Apple is trying to make a new all-time high, gapping down a little here pre-market. Nvidia made a new all-time high last week, along with Apple actually. So they're trying to pull things higher here, but I'm looking at this NASDAQ 520 top band of this auction, right? Detrimental. You can see right here from the prior week, low volume drop off after we made an excess and failed. Heavy volume to start the week at that high, proving it's a major stopping point. Massive, massive auction, volume balance from last week that spreads around from that like I guess like 350. This is what I was commenting last night, 350 into that like 380 area. So this huge balance from last week it's a major support structure. So anywhere within this area, I was kind of trying to identify if any buyers try to come into this. And so far they're holding it out, which is good because we're moving back above this auction based on this weekly. So for me, right, as this thing is about to close, like right now it's trading 420, as about to close above this like 400, 380 area. I'm looking at this from the perspective that buyers are going to be or are going to attempt to position on pullbacks, right? To see if we can go and tag and break this area, right? Let's move through that balance and go into this, I guess, heavier volume that sits around that 660, right? See if we can get that expansion. It's about time Nasdaq tries to catch some of these bids. So if we look at something to extend that on the individual session by session, Nasdaq has been moving and failing. Like it has these false breaks under this massive auction 320 start. It's getting these false moves and these excess moves with closes back above, which is inherently like more bullish realistically. But the failure to expand is a little concerning to me, right? Because we get this move again, like the S&P on the prior overnight, and then we get this excess right here. The start of the excess has constantly failed. So we need to clean this up, right? Which happens above here. And I think they should just shoot prices up if we can get above that. But right now, bottom of this prior balance region here on NASDAQ from the prior overnight, excess move is holding a support structure. The prior stall out of that low auction is holding a support as well. So we've got this cluster around like 350 to about like 370, which is kind of wide, right? Maybe even 380. It's very wide right now, but that's proving to be some kind of realistic support to kind of hold prices out. So for me, as long as we can hold above into the pre-market session, all this heavy volume here established, I'd expect around 370, 380 to go on the bid. And then it's detrimental that we move through this heavy volume that was left behind on this overnight and we get that expansion earlier on in the week. Otherwise, like it's a common factor where volume's super weak on the swing days higher than it is on the swing days lower. And we're losing time, right? The buyers are trying to establish themselves, but they don't want to establish themselves at higher prices. This is a very big concern. So if they can't establish themselves as we start breaking through these balanced auctions, right, you're most likely going to go and experience some lower prices where the buyers are going to be happier to jump into this thing, which is a massive here to be aware of. So into the beginning of the week, if we can just get closes above that 520 and above that like 59.10 on the S&P and the NASDAQ alike, then I'm going to expect to see some downside throughout this week for better buying at lower prices. On the NASDAQ, right, we could even establish a move down into about 180, right? Between 180 and 240 is probably an estimated area. But like I said, with the S&P, if we get on NASDAQ, if we get a move down here and we rebid above 320, that's going to be a very juicy long potential to go and actually break those guys. On the S&P, if we move below that 5850 and we rip back above it and close back above it, that's going to be the highest probability swing to the long side. So let's see how these guys establish right now. The bullet pre-market where we're trying to hold above these auctions, and I'm just going to be looking for pullbacks to start this week and see if we can go and trade those highs from last week from on the S&P and on the NASDAQ. Well, I guess let's say Friday highs on both. Can we go and trade those and see if we can get a cleaner expansion above those areas? So that's how I'm starting this off. Let us jump into our live trading room. If you guys enjoy this segment of the weekly update, let me know, and we will see you guys tomorrow. But let's go into our room right now and see if we can establish maybe more. Maybe we'll look at Delta or something. But generally, that's my plan to begin the week and looking for that expansionary move to the upside swing. So let's see, guys. If you do have any questions, let me know, and we'll